Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Circular Leaders podcast. Today on the show, we have Jonathan Briggs. Jonathan is the SVP of Sales at ShipMonk. Before ShipMonk, he has already spent about 20 years spanning through UPS, FedEx, DHL, Nimble, Dexterity. That's quite a list, Jonathan. I think you've touched all the big players out there in terms of logistics. And during all this experience, you've actually helped modern retail move forward, how it delivers, and how it now recirculates. I'm super excited to have this conversation. I've had a personal opportunity to work with you. So um, I'm excited to kind of deep dive into your career, learn from you, and help others also learn from you. So welcome to the show, and thanks for taking the time to be with us.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me. Thanks for making me not sound too old with all that introduction. Appreciate it. But you're right. It's covered kind of three tranches, as I call it, of parcel and last mile delivery, omni-channel fulfillment, and warehouse automation, artificial intelligence, robotics. So it sounds like a lot, but it really look at it, it's three categories that all kind of are intertwined together in the modern age of logistics.
Yeah, 100%. And what I really kind of found exciting and interesting about your career was that how it kind of progressed as the industry was evolving. So you've always stayed on the forefront of it, with starting with UPS, then FedEx, and then DHL, and then kind of Dexterity and robotics at Nimble, and then now working at ShipMonk, which is one of the biggest 3PL companies in the world. So yeah, super excited to start and get into it.
Same here. Thanks again for having me. Look forward to today's conversation.
Awesome. Yeah. So to start off, I'd love to kind of understand, you've where did your journey start, and kind of how exactly did it progress through where you are today?
Well, it started on the back of a dock. It was an accidental intro into this. I thought it was going to be a summer job. Started at UPS when I was 18 years old. One of the first hires after they went on strike in '97. So started this journey back in '98. Worked my way up for the first 6 or 7 years in operations while I was going through high school, college, and a little bit thereafter. Transitioned around '05 into selling, and
Mhm.
now I've been in sales related aspects of the industry ever since, either as an individual contributor or a leader or a combination of both. And so UPS led to DHL Express, which led to FedEx, then got back into another division of DHL called DHL Global Mail at the time, which is now DHL e-commerce. In the back end of that, they were trying out some new products to differentiate because they just had the postal based last mile delivery or work share product. And at the time, it was a 3 to 7 day product and a 2 to 5 day. And so 2016, 2017, Amazon's pushing hard to get into 2 day landscape, and we start seeing this like pressure on time definite or range definite services might not be as in vogue, and so they started looking at alternatives. So one of the things they got into, in addition to like a little bit more time definite based with the postal product, they got into same day delivery with a product called Parcel Metro, and then they were doing a regionalized fulfillment. And so got into that. They shut it down, just focused still on the parcel business, and then realized that fulfillment is kind of the future. And this is like 2018, 2019. Got over to a company at the time, it was pretty small, called Quiet Logistics. They scaled quite a bit through the pandemic, and eventually sold to the customer American Eagle. At the back end of that, I transitioned into the robotics, where you brought up the Dexterity and the Nimble stints. So got into AI robotics there. And then because we had converted Nimble into a fulfillment company, kind of came full circle back into that, and then here now I've been about 6 months here at ShipMonk, and so it's it's a lot of zigging and a lot of zagging, but it's really all this end of it, it's logistics, it's customer journeys, it's solutioning for customers to be able to meet and exceed the expectations in the modern retail environment.
Makes sense. I mean, as I was listening through it, the thought came to mind was what has stayed common throughout your journey, starting at UPS? Like, what has remained same about logistics, having led teams at such big companies, and having progressed through the industry so far?
Well, I think the only thing constant around here is change, right? Like and now the rate of change is exponential, right? What's happening, as we look at the landscape across parcel, across fulfillment, across robotics and stuff. as we get ready to launch a product, it's already like late to market and it's already obsolete, it feels like, right? So no longer are the life cycles of things lasting years and fives of years and decades. It's measured in like quarters now with the rate of AI in terms of things. So you've got to move quick. Things have got to go fast. So I think those have been true everywhere. I think that's, constantly, a CEO of mine back in my DHL days always talked about when the dot moves, be the first on it, right? Things are always going to figure out where that new direction is. And so that's part of why you've seen the pivot in my career path of going from parcel to fulfillment to, some automation as e-commerce started to mature. And I don't know if it's really mature yet. Maybe that's not the right thing. As it's grown in scale, it still feels Wild West out here. But really, like as that journey started to get a little bit more like, hey, it's here to stay. It's not just this little division and down in the basement that we're trying to mess around with. It's a forefront of most businesses' strategy of have some type of direct to consumer omni-channel strategy that involves direct to consumer. The logistics requirements ultimately, are under pressure from a performance standpoint, cost standpoint, but you're right. As you look back, there's not too much difference in products moving from point A to point B, other than maybe the manner that they move or the mode that they move, and ultimately how close the especially when you talk about like last mile delivery, the proximity to the end customer now is as close as it's ever been, right? Like, if you measure transportation through zoning, the full national networks of like UPS, FedEx, and DHL used to live somewhere north of zone 6. They're now living like zone 3. And so that's also part of the pressure you see when you look at what's going on, over the last couple of years, when you look at their performance in the stock market and the response and all these new age players popping up, is that national network, what was such a strength for them, having hundreds and thousands of planes and hundreds of thousands of trucks and hundreds of hubs, now is like it's a noose around their neck. It's holding them back because now it's layers of cost that never get utilized. Because if I go to zone 3 and under, I go to the local hub and I'm back and I touch 2 trucks and a hub, and I'm only using 15 to 25% of the network, and the other 75% is just driving up my cost model, right? So that's why we're seeing so much things happen there. So anyway, way off topic, I think, from what you asked in that question. So I'll try to bring it home for you to save us on that.
No, I think that was super insightful, and I completely agree with the fact that networks are getting more regionalized. There's a bigger importance to partnerships now, where you need to save costs by trusting the local partners. So just like partnerships that UPS has with UPS, and DHL has with USPS for a £1 and lower delivery. So I think those are the ways that I think big players, even smaller players, are looking at kind of trying to save costs and still be able to meet the promise that they have to the customers from while moving from point A to point B. You're right about the fact that things have been like moving things from point A to point B, but the expectation, the speed, has all changed from what it was like 10 years ago to today. And I think it has something to do with e-commerce, but it has a lot to do with just in general how the the companies have evolved their technologies to be faster and provide even a better value proposition, because they have to improve the promises they are making and so on. In that light, like at your current company ShipMonk, there's this the slogan is like stress less and grow. Like how does it like translate into like practice?
Well, I'll kind of give you a couple of scenarios here. So, one, when we talk about outsourcing in the fulfillment logistics space, you talk about taking low dollar problems away from customers so they can focus on big dollar solutions, right? And so, if a brand can focus on their customer and can focus on product and marketing and all that stuff, and you can partner with somebody behind the scenes to handle the day-to-day grind that is logistics. It's hard to run a building and get people motivated to come in, day out, and pick a lot of orders and pack a lot of orders and ship a lot of orders, and do that with consistency and proficiency and all those types of things. So basically what we're saying in there is we should be able to handle the back office so you can handle the front of the office, right? And so don't let the fact of a building size stop you from growing, or because if you run your own building, as an example, you might start out with a 10,000 square foot facility, and then all of a sudden you need 20, and then you need 100,000, and then you're like, do I want to keep growing? Because now I just keep, my fixed asset cost just keeps going up and up, and now instead of having 10 people, I've got 1,000 people. Like, it's just like really like problematic. Versus if you sign up for somebody like us that's really talking about a network strategy, you're not confined by the four walls of my one building. I might start you out in, say, Kentucky, but over time, your data might tell us that you need to be in Texas and California, or you need to be in Pennsylvania and Nevada or whatever. And I can just, nonchalantly spread you across the network. It's infinite capacity. You don't have to worry about, whether you double, triple, whatever. We will just expand the network or move your product to more locations and make you closer to the end customer and get you faster and all those things. So I think that's kind of it at its core, is like, let us focus on that painful low dollar stuff so you can focus on your big things. And if that's done right, it's exactly that. There's zero stress, because if I throw more marketing dollars, I don't have to worry about them to break my supply chain on the back end. I just know it's going to work. And I think a really good case in point for us is, something our organization is really proud of, and you've seen a lot in the news lately. But Dr. Squatch has been with us for a number of years now, and they got to scale it so much that they sold their business for over $1.5 billion to a conglomerate. And that doesn't happen if you're worried about your building running out of space and do I have enough people showing up to the building. And they just got to focus on marketing and product and sales channels, and we just kept growing and scaling with them, and they took it to a level that most people wouldn't even think you could go to. So I think that's a really good case study for that topic.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, ShipMonk has been, like, I think, a pioneer in that. I have read about the founder story as well, like how it kind of came up with as a college, like as a project while studying at university, and it has come to this level. Two thoughts come to my mind from what you kind of shared. No brand gets into the business, no brand or retailer gets into the business to be in the logistics business. They want to be in the selling business. They don't want to be in the logistics business. And the second one is, I think, I know like every brand makes promises to their customers, but they have to keep those promises. And that's where I think partners like ShipMonk and others come in place, where you can make promises through your marketing, through your advertising, through your product development. But if you don't fulfill them on time, customers are not going to come back to shop more. So I think it's we call it the backside or the back office of an operation, but I think it's the more critical part of being a retail or a brand itself, because if you can't make the promises, brands are not gonna grow, as Dr. Squatch has.
You've got to execute, right? Like, I was just having this conversation earlier today where you find out really quickly if you made the wrong choice on both sides, whether we as a provider bring the wrong merchant on board or the merchant brings on the wrong provider. And it's a really expensive, painful decision if you bring in. So it doesn't take long if you're just all like talk and you can't back it up. It's found out very quickly, and it's found out very costly and very publicly. Eventually, thousands of their friends will know about it on social medias and stuff like that. And so, it's not like we've been perfect forever. Like, I'm sure if you look back several years ago, there's a lot of bad press and, people that have come and gone through our network and had their complaints. What we were when we started and who we are today is drastically different. We've evolved, our capabilities have evolved, our customer profile has evolved. But I wish I could say we've been perfect since day one. We haven't been, but we really have dialed it in the last couple of years, really hit stride in our maturity and our capability. And we really do, like you're talking about, is live up. We have a lot of skin in the game in our contracts, a lot of teeth in our contracts. If we underperform, there's chargeback clauses, and we rewrite checks if we mess up. So we've got a lot of reasons to do it right, because if we don't, we're going to pay. And so the other thing too is, like, where I think we've taken it and where most people feel it is in the transportation side of the business. We are putting scanning events on starting from the time we put a shipping label on a package or a box or a bag, whatever you want to call it. We will put scans on it in our four walls. We scan it in sort. We scan it to a container receptacle. We scan the receptacle to the truck. we open a truck, we close a truck, we run our dock like it's a parcel network, like the same scanning technology, the same scanning logic. Because now, one of the things that's changed in the parcel world since I started in it, no carrier scans on our docks anymore, except for one. FedEx Express is the only carrier that scans a package on our dock. Everybody else is off a manifest, or a first physical scan is happening at the origin facility, whether that's a hub or it's a local site, whatever the case may be. So there's a lot of opportunities for things to go wrong in there. And what my transportation has done with our virtual carrier network to be able to put scan events and visibility and accountability in that gray area is huge, because ultimately in the fulfillment world, you're selling a transportation solution. I mean, let's be honest, right? You've been in this game a long time. The line item expense for transportation is almost double what the line item expense is for fulfillment. And so when you look at a dollar spent between those activities, 60, 70 cents that's going to transportation, 30, 40 cents that's going to the four walls. And that's the part that the customer really notices, right? Like, they get the ship notification. Is it tracking? Is it not tracking? They told me it's going to be 3 days. Does it show up in 3 days, or is it 7? And candidly, for the most part, if you said it's 3 and it shows up in 4, nobody's upset about that. It's the 3 that turns into 7 that gets everybody crazy, right? So having that accountability and that visibility, and then our team is tracking it, 5 stages in the dock, and then, all the way through, percent, amount of time that it took to get first scan from first scan to delivery scan. There's about 9 or 10 metrics that transportation team is looking at, so that we can deliver on those promises and be able to say, hey, if it's 2 days, it's 2 days. And if it's 5 days, it's 5 days. Because, as you know, not everybody cares about speed, but reliability matters a lot. And visibility coupled with reliability is like king. So, I know we've been chasing 2 days, 1 day, same day for a while, but we've actually seen the data say it could be 3, it could be 4, it could be 5, it could be 7. I don't care what the day is, but it's got to deliver when you tell them it's going to deliver. So having those different, scan events and checks and balances that we have in a group behind the scenes, like that, to me is the value. Rate and service shop, that's nice to have. Most everybody's doing that, but then having accountability for cost, performance, visibility, all of those things, to have a team behind the scenes, like that's the real value, I think, on the transportation side.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think having I think what separates ShipMonk from most of the players is the technology, that platform that you guys have built to kind of, for the customers, for the facility itself, and to have that kind of visibility of how the parcel is moving. And that is what I think separates a tech-enabled 3PL, or a tech front 3PL from a regular 3PL. In that sense of things, so we spoke about the software technology of scanning and things like that. Where do you see the role of robotics in it, not just from your current company, but from your previous experiences? How do you see this robotics wave has impacted the industry?
I've got a lot of viewpoints on it, right? I've been a user
I'm
of
excited to
them.
hear.
I've been part of the teams that have developed them. We built a fulfillment network around, high-end automation. The reality is, especially when you talk about multi-tenant, shared use fulfillment, it's really hard to automate in that environment for a couple of reasons. One, the contract lengths are pretty short. I think 2, most of those contracts don't have any CapEx associated with it. There's just a transactional dollar amount in it. And then 3 is the variety of the profiles of the product types and the order types, and then all of the customization and personalization that happens on there. And so then it's like, all right, if I bring in an automation piece and I can't use it for everybody and anybody in there, all I'm doing is adding overhead to the business and to those customers that can't use it, but that you're paying for it for everybody else to use. So it gets really hard in those regards. And I've been on it in a couple different pathways, right? Because my quiet story, they were the founders of Locus, and Locus spun out of there. So the AMRs, right? That's probably been the most mainstream automation that exists. But even as you watch the 3PLs that invented it are pulling away from the utilization of it, and not pricing deals to have an automation piece into it, because it's just adding more overhead to it. and now you start looking at the data, and like we run some locusts in our buildings as an example. And so I get almost 3x productivity in a non-locust environment than I do in a locust environment. So it's hard to justify that overhead and that automation when I can get over 300 picks per hour without it, and I get slightly over 100 picks per hour with it. It's like, and then the problem is everybody's got trained to see it, right? So we see all of our LinkedIn feeds and all the videos, and it's like, if you're not running robotics, you're nothing, right? Like that's what the message feels like. And the reality is, like, you're almost square pegging a round hole in these things because the automations are very limited in what they can do, the type of customer profile that it makes a lot of sense for. And so now in a lot of cases, like if you see that much automation, I don't know that you're actually getting that bang for your buck that people thought. And a couple of things you have going on is the industry's over leveraged, right? So there's far more dollars and cents that have been paid into the robotics industry than can come out of it. So there's a lot of pressure and a lot of good money thrown after bad. And so now it puts even more pressure on the few that actually have a viable solution at scale, because there's so many hundreds of millions of dollars that are thrown into these buckets of money. And it's hard for them to scale and grow and have the throughput and everything that exists. And then so the reality is I've been on all ends of it. I went as far all the way down to a path of an end-to-end autonomous almost supply chain. And I've come back full circle to a primarily manual environment driven by the software to optimize the manual tasks is actually proving right now in 2025 to be the best value that exists in the market right now. And so I don't know if that stays that way forever, but right now we're in a fairly good spot. The labor rates, or excuse me, the cost of labor is balanced and stabilized. The availability of labor is pretty balanced, at least nationally. I know there's pockets of the country that'll tell you a different story, and Columbus, Ohio is a good example of that, where there's way more DCs than there are people. And so even before COVID, they were living like around 2.5 to 3.5% unemployment rate, which is like you're really scraping the bottom of the barrel, right? So Plainfield, Indiana, outside of Indianapolis, or Indianapolis market as a whole, is in that same boat. But in general, across the country, we're seeing a pretty good story to be told around the cost of it. It's kind of flattened out for the most part. The quality of it's decent. And so now it's augmenting more softwares and decision making into the software to optimize the pick paths, standardize the workflows, get decisions off of the people, and just optimize, maybe better than automate, is where I'm seeing it right now. Now, long term, I think you go in 5-year increments. So does 2030 look different in 2025? Maybe. But the other issue that you see is the reliability in automation is not great. The amount of human intervention that has to happen in something that's considered fully autonomous is not great. So even where if you talk about like where they, pick and place robotics is supposed to be considered what's called full stack robotics, where technically you could replace a person's role or task end to end, is the theory behind it. So when they're selling that solution, it's saying, okay, what's your cost of labor? If we got rid of your people, what does this mean for you? How many shifts could you use this robot versus having to have another shift of people, blah, blah, blah. And so the theory of it's great. Like, oh my goodness, I can get rid of this person that all he does all day is move box from, A side to B side, or off the truck onto the conveyor belt, or from the conveyor belt to the truck, like repetitive motion, type stuff. Nobody wants to work in the warehouse anymore. That's what they all try to tell you. And then the reality becomes the amount of times that robot breaks down or fails to compute the task. And then now you're paying for the robot, and you're paying for this overseer of the robot to come in. And now guess what happened? You didn't displace labor, you added labor, because quality went down, throughput went down, and breakages went down. And that's where we're at in the robotics space. Like I hate to be the bearer of bad news. But they're in the ones that are considered full stack and it can, quote unquote, replace a person, have not replaced the people like they intended it to do. It should happen. I mean, this is true of everything that's happening, right? Like, if what I'm telling you is true, we would not be in automobiles, right? We'd still be in horse and buggy, right? Because that was the issue with cars when they first started. They didn't drive far, they broke down often, they were expensive, they were clunky. Eventually people will get it right, but we're still a good ways from that. And so right now, there's not a lot use cases that have been really proven to where it displaces a ton of labor from my perspective, or you add so much overhead to do it that the ROIs get challenging. I think the best story and the long-term stories around automated storage and retrieval. I think that has the highest opportunity to displace labor, but the fixed costs on that are astronomical. And then the narrow path that exists now of what can fit in there gets super narrow. So if you go back to what I was talking about on the front end of like the different profiles of orders and the different profiles of products, that gets really constrained in an automated storage and retrieval environment. But those are probably the best stories because they have a three-dimensional use case or business case, right? It's labor, it's warehouse cubic footage versus square footage. They're working vertically, not just horizontally. And they show great storage density, decent throughputs, but at the same time, it's the fixed overhead. And then in an e-commerce environment, especially they're very cyclical, right? They spike and they drop, and they spike and they drop, and so you might really maximize that machine for like 6 weeks out of the year, and then have you over engineered your building? Is it losing money the rest of the year? Like, what do you do when that building, you only need a third of the robots that you have on the grid for peak season? You're paying for them year round. So that's where it gets really challenging, especially in the 3PL environment, because especially folks like us that are doing it in a transactional environment or a variable model, right? We're OpEx only. I have to be mindful of that, and we're on risk, and the customer's at risk. I'm either going to overcharge them or I'm going to undercharge them. So that's kind of some of the complexities that we're seeing.
Makes sense. Yeah, I mean, brands and their customers don't care about what robotics is going inside a warehouse. What they care about are the parcels going on time to their customers. So as a 3PL or anyone with a facility, you have to kind of have an ROI of anything you invest in. And robotics right now is more like, as you said, I completely agree with it. It's more of an overhead and a cost into the long-term horizon of, hey, in 7 years, I'm going to be net profitable on using this robotics because my team has got trained around it. I'm super, like I've seen so many cases happening or like use cases being taken care of in my facility. So yeah, I completely agree with it, and it was insightful for me to hear what you said because just like many of the other people who would see on the LinkedIn, it might seem like robotics has already kind of taken over, but it has not, as I kind of listened through you. And it's a single use case kind of a setup when it comes to robotics. Do just this specific task. Wherever variability comes, the robot itself has to be trained again. And then that includes hiring people who are robotics engineers and things like that into your facility. And those folks don't, they are really highly paid individuals. So, in a warehouse setting, that's like adding to the cost versus reducing the cost. So if one robotics engineer has to join a team, that's equal to probably seven like warehouse executive or warehouse operators, right? Or
Oh yeah.
employees. So it's the ROI is just not here. But I think it's for the bigger powerhouses like FedEx and the ones that have that cash in hand to be able to take the industry forward. Once they kind of take it to a point where, hey, this is all profitable, then I think it would trickle down to the rest of the players in
And as you
industry.
know, they're all investing in a heavy, and those make sense, right? Like the amount of headcount they have and the labor rate that they pay for is high, right? Because and they're competing with a against the UPS or FedEx is competing against each other, right? So the pay scales have to be in line. There's high benefits, there's high turnover. So, but there's hundreds of thousands of hourly based employees in those environments, and they're high volume, high cost, high injury, high turnover. So they have to figure it out, right? But they also have the funds to do that, right? Being
Mm-hmm.
$90+ billion
Of course, yeah.
organizations. So it's a no brainer for a FedEx, a UPS, a DHL, a Walmart, Target, an Amazon, right? Like, because they have hundreds of thousands of blue collar employees in there
Mm-hmm.
that they've got to figure out a way to do it. But they can afford it. They're invested in it, right? Like you see them, they're users of it. They invest in it. They adopt. They co-create things because their profit margins are heavily eroding. There's a lot of pressure against the parcel networks, all the things we talked about on the front end of this conversation, where the regionals and the new tech forward parcel companies are coming in and taking space. So they have to figure out, how do I drive overhead out of my business, right? Because we talked about, as the zone shrinks and we get closer to the end customer, that baggage of a national network starts to get real heavy real fast. And so if they can get people out by the tens of thousands, like that's really meaningful. So I'm not saying that people shouldn't invest in robotics and that there isn't a play for them or anything, but I think to your point, it's kind of reserved for the haves versus the have-nots at this point in time, because they have the most at risk. They have the most pressure on them, being in the public eye, being publicly traded organizations. There's been a lot of stock pressures on all of those organizations. And so they definitely, and if they get it right, it has an instant ROI once they get it to scale. Now, they also have the hardest use cases for robotics, because especially in the parcel environment, no two trailer loads are the same, and no two parcels are the same on any given day. And the edge cases are the ones that break it. I think they're probably like a good, I don't know, somewhere between 80 and 90% of the way. It's that last 10% remaining, that rounding error type stuff, that's making and breaking the use. Because the other challenge they have is the variability, coupled with the time sensitiveness of the pull times have to be the pull times. So the throughputs matter. So the issue you run into is like the rate that an employee can load or unload a trailer is, pushing to 1,000 parcels an hour, and the robots aren't to 1,000 parcels an hour consistently or accurately. And so now if you can't slow it down the network and be like, all right, we'll pull the trailer 4 hours later today, because, well, you can't. You're running a time definite network. Your air networks have got to move. You're got guarantees for deliveries, or at least for your next day and second day products. So you can't slow it down. So now you're asking a robot to do superhuman things that it can't do yet. And so that is the challenge of that the robotics industry has, is that their customers expect superhuman, and they're not even to human parity right now. And so so it's an interesting thing. But I think obviously all of those organizations that we rattled off by name are investing heavily, using it heavily, but still the rate of deployment is not high. So which tells me that the use cases are still being figured out. The POCs and the pilots are still in pilot mode. There's not a lot of true scale deployments in there, which still says we're figuring it out as we go.
Yeah, 100%. And companies of that scale like FedEx, DHL are able to do that because they also have the foundational systems to run robotics the way they want and the way they train, right? There's a lot of data, I'm guessing, goes into training robots as well. So if you don't have that much amount of data, how are you going to optimize it? So I think, as you said, like the bigger powerhouses are the ones who have to take it forward, because they are the ones who have to figure out all the kinks of working a robotics in a big setting, because they are controlling all that data. I take an example of Amazon where I work, that where you have, I think I would believe that they have, if not the most, but in the top three amount of automations in any fulfillment center. And the secret of it is essentially everything is standardized within Amazon. Every warehouse looks same.
Yeah.
The WMS is same. Anything that enters an Amazon building has to be standardized to Amazon standard before it enters. Whereas for 3PLs, when you're onboarding a brand or when you're working with multiple thousand players, they come with their own taxonomy and they expect you to normalize all of that
Yep.
for you. So that's the advantage the bigger players also have, where they can change the variables and make them standard according to their needs versus the other.
Yeah. And what's interesting there in that example is they have the most robots deployed of any other organization, potentially all the other organizations combined. There's millions of robots deployed across their network, and they still have 1 million associates. Like that's the crazy part of it. So they still have not gotten to where I just saw earlier this year, I can't remember the timing on it, but they finally had a robot that they were using at a pack out level to handle units. So everything up until now has been a material handling type of solution, point A to point B, AMR, GMR, right? But now they finally deployed it. What was interesting though in the video I saw, and you probably know what I'm talking about, that big arm thing that's like reaching into the top of the bin. But so they have all this video showing that And then leading up to it, they have what's called singulation. So singulation means I'm taking one item, putting on a conveyor belt, and there's an employee doing the singulating. The easiest thing for in the robotics world is actually the singulation piece, and have that point A to point B. And I'm like, they didn't even automate the easy part of this thing. And so it tells me that maybe even the video might not be as good as they are making it look, and how many takes did it take to show that video type of
Yep,
thing.
yep, yep.
But that's the challenge. Until you can do the part that's dexterity driven, right? The things that we take for granted, our hands and our arms and the touch side of people, that's where the robotic space is still more of a material handling equipment than it is like that full stack piece that we're talking about.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I see like robotics having a better, like it's going to come in the 3PL, the warehousing industry as well, but it's going to be more successful in the manufacturing spaces where I feel like, especially with this pull for like off, like bringing in manufacturing back home, robotics I think can play a bigger role over there in terms of kind of making that need of having that labor, specialized labor. I think just like Tesla and other some players are
Yeah.
using kind of robotics to do it. I think robotics has a bigger promise that it can meet in the manufacturing world, because then you're building a product and your steps and your use cases are pretty much clear of what you want every humanoid arm or every robot to do. Whereas in a warehousing environment, there's a lot of variability. Someday you would get a furniture truckload, someday you would get a apparel truckload. How are you going to you can train a robot, but then again, if a person is standing right next to it and observing anything, might as well that person doing that job versus the robot doing it,
You're
in
absolutely right. I
that
mean,
sense.
they've had robotics since the '60s in the automotive industry, right? And
Mhm.
that's the part that's easy, right? It's that precision, repetitive. I touch the same nut or the same bolt or the same door 400 times a day. I do the same
Mhm.
thing, and it's in the same location because it goes to a stop point, and that's the easy part of it. It's the
Mhm.
things we were talking about in that parcel world where things are moving fast and the shapes are changing and the locations are changing, and where do I pick up and it's a mess. That's the challenge. So robotics in manufacturing is the fastest unlock there is, and it's going to make a ton of sense. In the wake of all of this de minimis change and the duties and taxes, and if you're going to reshore manufacturing, you definitely have to invest in automation to do it, and they have the highest likelihood of success, even with what currently is on the market, because the industrial robotics have, like you said, have been around since the '60s.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I'm excited to see that wave as well at some point kind of
Oh yeah,
come alive, because that's really going to unlock manufacturing throughput by like leaps.
oh yeah, oh yeah.
Awesome. I want to make a segue into the circular economy piece of this conversation. The theme of this podcast is talking to leaders about how they perceive and have seen reverse logistics play a role in the parcel fulfillment and the overall industry. So I want to talk to you about you know in your experience working for multiple partners and working with multiple brands and retailers. How do you see the industry perceives returns? Like, let's start there to kind of what's
Oof.
the overall point of view on returns?
Well, I like returns from an operator's perspective. The industry hates them. They're awful, right? Like it means something is not right. You either have a product problem, you have a fit problem, you have a website problem because you can't tell your story properly, right? Like there's all these like things, and the returns rates in especially in e-commerce are still not sustainable, right?
Mhm.
And it's creating waste problems, cost problems, profitability problems, right? Like it's because a return is almost 2 to 3 times more expensive than an outbound unit, right? And
Yeah.
so and the likelihood of it truly being sellable after the fact gets slimmer and slimmer. And also put yourself in your shoes. Like if I'm buying something new, I want to buy something new. I don't want to buy something that came back twice through the logistics network, and so then people don't receive returns well if it's not repackaged properly. So returns is definitely challenging. We saw a lot of data recently as part of a loop um, conversation like this in a webinar event, and they shared a lot of data, and it's like plus 80% of merchants are now charging for returns, and it was like 84, 85. I forget the exact number, but I was surprised. I didn't realize we've gotten that high, but it makes a lot of sense, right? So you
Yeah.
want to put a little bit of friction, you want to cover some of that cost, and we're seeing even like opt-in pieces where people can like I'll pay $1 at checkout or $2 at checkout, and I guarantee that I don't pay any more for returns. And it's like an insurance policy on returns kind of monetized there. So we're seeing people pay and charge for them. And so I think that's telling, because it was forever, it was like, you were shamed if you were charging a return, right? Like it was like,
Mhm.
how dare you in the
Yeah.
e-commerce, right? So there was a stigma around charging. Well, obviously that stigma is gone. Profitability matters now in 2025.
Mhm.
And so we're seeing a high amount of returns being charged. And and I know this, that whatever, I think they said their data was like $8 and change. I forget what the exact numbers, 8.25 or 8.75. But that's not enough, right? Like
Yeah.
the logistics, because you
Yeah.
got to pay get it from the customer's doorstep to the dock. Then I've got to charge you to receive it, inspect it, recondition it, rebag it, retag it. So now I'm adding a couple bucks to it. Then I got to put it away, and then you got to start that journey all over again. So it's not great in terms of the merchant. If you're not less than 10% returns rate, like I don't know how you're making the margins work, candidly. And we still see most apparel plus 15%, and in some categories plus 25% for like more of like the swims and the intimates and stuff like that. Fit's so challenging. So there's a whole bunch of things, but one thing that I do see as a result of it is we're seeing more time spent on refurbishment instead of just like tossing it in the trash. We're seeing new secondary markets pop up where, all right, I can't sell it as new, but I can sell it in a marketplace environment and let people know that it's good, but not new, right? And then I can take pictures of videos of it. I'm seeing some tech pop up about doing returns that don't actually come back to the fulfillment center, that are almost like marketplace. Like I go from the end consumer to the next consumer, either as a direct move or as a channel play. So there's some of those things. I think AI is going to come into play with it to help offset it. So right now it's ugly, right? Like you
Yep.
see
Yep. Yep.
the cost of it, the messiness of it, and then more importantly, the amount of, like, you've seen the 60 Minutes episodes where it's just landfill after landfill, things are just getting
Yes.
dumped in the trash, and then there's certain brands that are so high and mighty that I will not give
Yeah.
this to anybody. I will set it on fire, right? We all know who those people are, right? So there's a lot of stuff just waste for the sake of waste because they're worried about their brand being, ruined, or their they look cheap if they donate it. I don't know all the rationale behind it, but it's expensive, right? And we saw a lot of people try to do the like rental stuff. That's not proven very profitable either, right? It's a great story, I think, to say, hey, instead of just sitting in the back of your closet, I can just refresh it 3-4 looks a week and ship them back. But now you're returning every item that you get, so that's challenging. And then if you talk about it like circularity through the lens of like, I want to take a full life cycle, like I've seen like Adidas is like playing in this space where it's like barcoding, everything's like, okay, we'll take it back, and then we'll recycle the fibers, and we'll regenerate it and put it. That's super expensive and challenging. Like there's just, I don't know that there's a good answer other than figuring out how to better show your product, better tell your story, prove fit, right? There's some technologies out there that I thought would have been game changing that really haven't changed the game in terms of fit, because fit's the number one reason typically we see a return, especially in the apparel footwear space, right? So I think if you can truly tell the story, truly say this is how it's going to fit, and know that it's going to fit every time, that reduces exponential amount of returns. And then I think a lot of them, especially when you buy them from the marketplace, it's like a quality thing. It's like on Amazon, it looked like it was the most luxurious product, and then when I put it on my skin, I broke out in hives, and I'm sending it back because there's no friction in the return policy. So some of us, we just got to make better products. I think I think sustainability to me goes back to my dad's school of thought, right? He's in his 70s now. And he's like, if you buy something one time for your whole life, like that's sustainability, right? Like tools. He's got the same tennis, he's a laborer and worked in the trades. He's got the same tools he had when he was a kid. They were handed down from his uncle, right? Like, he's had tools for 50 plus years and takes pride in that, versus, if you ask him about a tool today, oh, they're all junk, right? They're not made in America anymore. And, I use it once and I break it. Like, there's a lot of truth in that, right? If you make a product that lasts, we don't need to have it, over that. So to me, I do subscribe to that the greatest component of sustainability is making good quality products that can stand the wear of time.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, the best way to prevent a return is never have a return, and you can never have a return if you kind of communicate to the customer what exactly like to your point, like have better quality products as well as communicate what the product is about. So before the customer is making that decision to buy it, they know exactly what they're buying so that the rate of returns would decrease. And you're right. Like it's a very challenging problem in a way where if a return is coming back, it's taking 50% of the MSRP away. So let's assume that your wholesale cost of any good was about 30% of your MSRP, and if 50% is gone in returns, you rather don't want to touch it than touch it and then try to see what to do with it, which
Correct.
puts the brands and their partners in a very difficult position. Do I invest in it? Do I not invest in it? So there is a big need of kind of having solutions um, which kind of make it, at least have some financial recovery or sustainability gains or tax return gains for the brands, because returns are going to be part of retail now, because that has, it's like that promise has been made that you can charge for it, but that's going to slow down the number of returns, but it's not going away. It's going
Correct.
to only stay there, like especially in case of like some brands would not just put like a charge to have you return, but would be like, hey, you'd have to go to UPS physically now to return it, or Kohl's physically now to return it. So there
Correct.
are barriers to returning, but the return problem is going to stay. I think it's in the industry. It's for us to kind of figure out how can we get the most out of them. I think the angle that you shared about brand equity, where some brands would prefer to burn versus kind of sell, I think that plays a role for any brand that goes beyond a 7-figure or an 8-figure, because as most brands, you're competing with 100 other brands in the same category.
Yeah.
And if your brand shows up in a flea market or in a used good market in a very bad shape, that puts your brand in a very bad light, which impacts your forward business. So the space and the problem is not just about how do you get financially best about it, but how do you protect your brand in the process, because your name tag and your brand is still attached to it. You can definitely get rid of it one way or the other, but your name is still attached to it.
Funny
And
you say
lastly,
that because I've seen some SOPs where we cut tags in the past.
okay, got it. Yeah, yeah. I
So
mean, I know some of my clients who want that to happen just
yeah.
just just before it moves out.
Yeah, so
Uh,
there are some people that maybe are going down that path. The other thing we didn't get down the path of, so I'll get us there
mhm.
is fraud, right? So
Yeah, yeah.
I think a lot of these things, most people will like if you knew that it wouldn't become viral, you would
Mhm.
just say, hey, you know what, customer, just keep that product. Don't
Yes.
use it, give it away. But as soon as you do something nice from the good of your heart, they go tell 10,000 of their friends in like a Reddit subreddit channel saying, hey, guess what? You don't have to do anything, and just tell them to do this and they'll give you their product for free, right? And so those are some of the things that I think are the other side of returns, I guess I should say, is fraud is up high.
Yes. Part is definitely high.
Fraud is at its all-time highest, and then if you do something like I said, that just exacerbates people wanting to take advantage of that brand. And so, because I think most of these things, especially for how low dollar they are,
Mhm.
like if I'm selling a unit that's under $10, why are we spending $15 to return it back to a warehouse and do something, as an example? And a lot of them are, that is the case, but you're doing that, at least bringing it back. You might not refurb it or do anything, but you're at least doing that because you don't want to be taken advantage of from a fraud perspective.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, fraud, as you said, like I was reading somewhere 14% of the returns that come back are fraud. There's something or the other wrong
It's
with them.
crazy.
I think there's this company called Two Boxes. If you might have seen them, they publish on LinkedIn, and they kind of show the pictures of, hey, what was sent and what was returned. I've also heard this quote, like when you're sending goods, you can expect what you're sending, but when you're returning goods, you don't expect what you're getting. You can
Yeah.
get anything. So it's definitely a problem. So how do you see it playing in the 3PL industry right now? Like, are 3PLs getting more are investing? Have they had to invest more resources into managing the return problem now that it has increased?
Well, I think they should. I don't think they
Mhm.
are, right? There's
Mhm.
still a large group that are outsourcing to another third party to do their returns VAS work. There's a lot of other people that are outsourcing their development to to outside tech platforms to manage the returns processing. And so there's very few people that are doing it natively in-house intuitively. And so I think that's an area where we have a huge advantage in the space, is that we own our own tech. We're doing it in-house, in the same warehouse. We don't have multiple third parties on there. We have a whole strategic roadmap on this. Like I co-chaired the strategy for our business, and so we've got, like, we kind of set it up through the lens of like MVP, market competitive, and then pioneering for the industry. And so we're somewhere in that journey between MVP and market, market expected. But I think as we progress in the next couple of quarters, we want to be first in class and best in class in that regard. So I know we as a business have a huge investment in it, right? We've got 3 bets next year as a business. One's apparel, one is B2B, and the other one's AI. And so you can't be betting on apparel if you're not betting on the returns, right? They go hand in hand. So as that goes, the returns expectations will come with it. So we got some cool things that we're thinking about and building in there. But not a lot of people are doing that. Like I said, it's more third party tech, and good for them. Not knocking, because I know some of the leadership in those businesses, and great people and great products. But I'm of the mindset that, especially in the software side of 3PL, you should own the tech, because it's a bottleneck. What happens if that business goes out of business, or what happens if they can't make all the changes you need, and you can't fully integrate it into your workflows? Like, there's just bottlenecks and costs that get added if you're not running that yourself. And so that I think is the bigger thing. And then if you're doing it outside in a third party to the third party, you're adding like a buck almost, in terms of that you got to package it to reship it, you got to transit, you got to receive it. Like, so you're so inefficient, it hurts in that regard. And so we've seen a lot of the 3PLs say, oh, I don't want to invest in it, I don't want to do it. So here's somebody, all they do all day, every day is returns refurbishment. I'll go with it. It sounds great on paper, but when you start thinking about, I've got to ship it, I got to transit, I got to receive it, and you're like, ooh, like that's adding days, that's adding cost. And so not a great way, but I guess it's better than not having a return solution at all. But yeah. So I think those are the areas that I think about and spend a lot of time seeing in the space.
Makes sense. I mean, it's kind of that you like, as part of the themes you're also addressing returns, because yeah, I mean, as you said, a lot of 3PLs don't see it as a problem they want to solve, and it's an outsourced problem. And that's, that has been our wedge into the market as well, because 3PLs don't want to handle it. We would handle for them.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of 3PLs popping around the country which are just returns focused. Like, all the return goods are going to go there. They're going to get reshelved. If not reshelved, they're going to get palletized and sold wholesale. So those are some of the avenues. I think it helps, having a return focused 3PL itself is an expertise that building out for a 3PL starting out is a challenge. You're focused on kind of getting good at forwarding goods on time. Now you're kind of dealing with reverse flow as well, and thinking I'd be able to do a good job with that as well. There's a lot of technology you need as well, which I think is hard to kind of adopt to at this point, and a lot of human judgment of what is a used grade A product to a grade B product to a grade C product. All of those things kind of play a role as well. So, but the 3PLs that would provide that overall like circular service to brands would come in really handy, especially for the enterprise brands, because there's a lot of ESG and environmental acts pressure as well on the bigger brands, that they simply cannot dispose of their goods. They do have to show that they are in circulation. So, for instance, I think in California there's a law coming in 2026 where you have to account for every good to be resold, right? So that's where I think 3PLs who would make a head start, and I'm excited to see that you guys would be helpful, because that problem would fall on somebody's head, one way or the other, even if it's not for
California's
financial
going to be
reasons.
tough, because they also have that, but then I think it's the end of this year too, where you have to be accountable for your secondary and tertiary impacts on like CO2 and carbon emissions and stuff like that. And so you have to have reporting back to the brands to be able to say, hey, here. And so obviously reverse logistics ties into that piece quite a bit. So yeah, California is not an easy place to do business.
Yeah, 100%. And I mean, and that's something that we are also making a head start on, like having the ability to measure the CO2 emission from your wastages. Because
Yep.
most like platforms and even tech enabled returns companies are not focusing on they focus on the financial aspect. of how much you can recover out of it. But there are not many solutions that would provide that, hey, these are the ESG gains that you made out of, like preventing wastage. And that's a very complicated subject as well. As you can think of it, like, plastic has different emissions, metal has different emissions, a bed would have a different emission than an apparel. So it's not a very easy problem to solve, as you're also realizing, but it's exciting to kind of see that the space is becoming more and more important. And as more players get into it, there's going to be a lot more innovation there for sure. But yeah, really good to hear your thoughts. I want to move to the last section, if that's all right.
Yeah.
Awesome. So in this section, I just want to get your leadership perspective, having spent so much time into the industry. What's one outdated belief about logistics you wish brands and retailers or anyone in the industry just threw away today?
Forecasting matters. And so I don't know that the brands realize how important forecasting is to run a business, right? And so
Mhm.
all the labor plans, all the capacity, whether it's automation or people involved, you need to know what's coming. So I don't think people realize how important it is to have a good, accurate forecast around what's receiving going to look like, what's outbound going to look like, and what's returns going to look like over the next couple of weeks. And so that's one area I wish more people spent more time on in there.
Yeah, 100%. Like demand sensing is a missing piece.
Yes,
It's all reactive. It's not proactive with
correct.
how the thing is going to move. Although you can never be 100% precise, but having that direction where you're going is very important, especially with labor planning,
Oh
supply
yeah.
planning, and things like that. Awesome. If you were to advise, or just for your own purposes, where would you invest the most in the next decade? Like as a leader in 3PL in the logistics industry, where would you say that this is the place I would invest the most?
I'd invest in software and probably most likely OMS. I think people, even the folks that are investing in robotics, are thinking that like, making, product point A to point B within a warehouse matters more. But all like we talked about on the front end, transportation is the largest expense that's out there. So I think if people could figure out, especially at a 3PL level, where to put inventory around the country, not just within the four walls, would drastically change and get people into multiple locations. And it really requires that OMS piece to have the predictability, not look through the rear view mirror of the Excel sheets and what we sold, but to your point, like the demand planning, that forward looking, and be able to know, hey, I want 10,000 units in California and 5,000 units in California or Florida, and I want 25,000 up in New York as an example. And versus today, we'll put that many total combined units in Kentucky and see what happens, right? So I think it's the OMS piece and making it predictable will be a game changer and will far outpace any of the gains that anybody gets in automating their four walls.
Yeah, 100%. Especially with the carrier rates increasing so much,
Yeah.
it's very important to be distributed in a way where you can reduce that like last mile to the customer.
Oh yeah.
Awesome. Last piece, lightning round. This would be just like one word for every question I ask. Let me know when you're ready, and I'll get started with
Let's do
those.
it. Let's go.
Awesome. First one, one word that describes the future of fulfillment. Just one word.
Necessary.
Definitely. One technology that will define the next 5 years. I know it's a bit similar to the last question, but again.
I'm taking OMS again. I'm taking
Okay.
OMS 2.0. It is, yeah.
Awesome. Awesome. You're bullish on OMS. I'll have to, I'll have to look more into the mechanics of it.
Yeah.
One metric every brand should be tracking, but is not.
Click to doorstep. Measuring from the time the order's placed to the time it's delivered,
That,
versus like either click to ship or ship to deliver. You need to measure it
mhm.
through the eyes of your customer and look through it that way. So definitely click to doorstep.
Yeah, that's very insightful. I think it ties up to the initial conversation we had, where how ShipMonk, you guys are like tracking every step of the process so that the end customer has it.
Oh yeah.
Awesome. Very nice. Last question. One thing you wish people understood about circularity.
I didn't catch the last part of the question. Understood about what?
Circularity.
It's really hard.
Mhm.
I think that's the moral of the story is it's really hard, and so figuring out ways to make it not so hard, I think is really how that becomes successful.
Mhm.
And right now there's just so many barriers of it that around regulatory stuff, around the brand stuff that we were talking about, the logistics of it, like all of those things. So figuring out how to make it easier and simpler for everybody, from the consumer through the merchants and everybody in between there.
Yeah, 100%. It's a messy space right now, but we've solved all kind of problems as a society. So this one is also going to get solved with time. All right, Jonathan, this has been a pleasure speaking with you. I really appreciate you taking the time to share all your insights, and I'm hoping people would find a lot of value out of it. Where can people find you?
So I'm all over
If
LinkedIn.
you want to be found.
I do want to be found. So I come on these things. So obviously LinkedIn, probably the simplest. Obviously you can interact with our business at shipmonk.com. But those are probably the two easiest ways to get in touch with us.
Awesome. Thanks, Jonathan. This was a real pleasure. Appreciate your time again.
No, my pleasure. Thanks for having me. And we could have gone for 10 more hours. So thanks for keeping me reined in.